going down, y'all? This is Ahyalawan here with another video, and today we got to put in our 2 cents about this PlayStation 5 Pro mid-generation console upgrade. Right? There's been a bunch of articles that have come out. You got people that have been getting hands-on with the PlayStation 5 Pro, have been very impressed by some of the results that they're seeing. Digital Foundry is a great example. These guys, they go and get the footage and break it down and zoom in and show you the smaller, finer details and what's different between original PlayStation 5 and the PS5 Pro. This is some unprecedented leaps when it comes to mid-generation update when we're looking at this console here. And we got all the stats, right? We talked about the stats before. You got a 10% boost of the CPU power. You got what, a 2 terabyte SSD storage capacity. You have a 50% upgrade to the GPU that's in the PS5 Pro. And this includes AI-based upscaling, which is something that you don't find in most AMD GPUs. You actually see this more so in NVIDIA's DLSS technology, at least to this extent. Deep AI learning, that's something that is a bit more of a newer technology. So for that to be implemented in a mid-generation console refresh, when that technically is something that we would expect to see on the PlayStation 6, that alone is very impressive because the results are showing. Now, the question you got to ask is this enough to warrant a $700 price tag? The answer is simple. Yes, of course it is. You understand? Nano circuitry does not come cheap these days, especially with China breathing down the neck of Taiwan. Taiwan is the country that pioneers the advancements in nanotechnology for computers and silicon and wafers and what do you call it, microchips and nano chips and all these different technologies that you see in like the latest iPhones and Samsungs and high-powered Android phones, and even in laptops and computers and GPUs and CPUs and all these things. They come down to the process capability that is pioneered by a company like TSMC, which is based in Taiwan. So all these technologies come from that, you understand? And for them to be so tight with the United States and getting trade on over here, you're getting a lot of technology brought over here from that. That's another reason why there's a lot of politics involved with these things, especially when you have, chip shortages and things like that. It affects everything, the car industry, all of that. So given that World War III could literally pop off at any second, and even still, innovations and reasonably priced economics can still find its way into your living room, we really have no reason to complain about the price of the PlayStation 5 Pro. If this isn't a budget GPU, this is the equivalent of an RTX 4070, which is a very respectable GPU. You understand? That's a current gen NVIDIA GPU that is considered a medium tier to a higher tier. You understand? Like, you're spending at least $450 to $600 for one of these, just for the GPU alone, right? Graphics cards are usually the most expensive component for any PC, especially if someone chooses a higher tier or a mid-tier GPU. And that's not much different with the expenses required to make this generation of consoles. We're talking about a 4-year leap in graphics upgrades with the PlayStation 5 Pro, which is pretty impressive for it to be a 50% boost overall after 4 years. You know what I'm saying? This console was created exactly for fans of Sony like myself. Sony, they always look towards innovation. You can see it clearly in the footage we're looking at right here. I'm actually using a Sony Xperia 1 Mark V smartphone, which is their flagship phone from last year, coupled with the Xperia Stream gaming attachment that I got from Japan. And I'm using a 5G connection on my commute back from what was a 12-hour shift at the Tesla factory over here in Texas. I don't have a lot of time to play video games these days, but when I do, I appreciate, technology like what Sony brings to the table, especially with something like a cell phone where I can play PlayStation games and I can connect my dual sense controller to it and play with it connected to a monitor on the bus ride from work, which is crazy. So big ups to Sony because they always continue to innovate with new ways to play. And I've always appreciated their passion for technology and the way that they strive to bring unique features with all of their products, not just the consoles, but like I said, the cell phones, the speakers, the headphones, and everything that they've done in the past. Sony's just been incredible like that. We'll talk about the mobile gaming setup that I have here a little bit later in the video. But I want to get back to this PlayStation Pro, man. So this console is exactly what this generation has been needing right about now. See, PlayStation has all the advantages right now when it comes to launching their mid-gen refresh. They clearly have the Xbox beaten to a pulp with over twice the amount of consoles sold within the past 4 years. I believe the PlayStation has about 62 million plus PS5 sold versus the Xbox, which is about 28 million, and that's both versions combined, the Series X and the Series S. I want to take you a step back here to consider something. People tend to forget that God of War, which came out in 2018, that was a game that pushed the PlayStation 4 to its absolute limit, and that was towards the end of that generation of consoles. The PS4 Pro had came out, I believe, in 2016. So when God of War came out, the PS4 Pro, was able to enhance the gameplay of God of War in a very good way, and that was the frame rates, right? Because it even allowed the option to play the game at 60 FPS at 1080p, and I believe that God of War ran at about 1080p, but 30 frames per second on the base PlayStation 4. So it was a very difficult task for the hardware back then. That was a very demanding console game, and it was a flagship game that would define the generation for PlayStation. So you can't take that away from them. That was a 30 FPS game, single player game. So it's not too much different than what we see now. Game series like Call of Duty, like what you're seeing right here, I'm playing a mobile version of it. Battlefield, those were multi-platform games, and they looked really good on the older hardware, but it looked even better with the mid-gen refresh, and then even more so when the next generation launched. PS5 came in, the Series X came in, and so Call of Duty, Warzone 2, Modern Warfare 2, those games had taken leaps and bounds over the previous generation of consoles and the way that it looked. Then you had Cyberpunk 2077, which was one of the most highly anticipated games of all time. It was far too demanding for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. It was delayed all the way until the launch, shortly after the launch of the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. And when it did, we saw that even the newest generation of consoles would struggle to maintain a 60 FPS with the resolution beyond 1080p. The next generation of consoles was a requirement for Cyberpunk because the older consoles were limited to 30 FPS, but with terrible graphics settings, and that obviously caused a lot of controversy. You know what happened with Cyberpunk on the old gen models, the Xbox One, the PlayStation 4 base model. So we know all that history. But the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 Pro, or the One X and the PS4 Pro, those actually proved to be excellent consoles for a lot of games during that generation because they really boosted the quality on a lot of those games that came out that were made for that time. But there was always a few games that would push the console to its limitation, games that actually looked beyond what that console was capable of. Cyberpunk is a really good example of that. God of War is another one. Xbox, even during this current generation, they got Starfield, right, which was limited to 30 FPS as well. And those are just a few examples, but you can go further back and look at the PlayStation 3 era, back to the golden days of the PlayStation 3 when you had Killzone 2, Killzone 3, you had Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots. Those were games that pushed the PlayStation 3 to its absolute limit. And the developers like Polyphony Digital, of course, creates Gran Turismo. That game ran at 1080p, 60 FPS. It was designed to be like that. It was designed with a safe and careful approach to its development to ensure that 60 FPS target render, right? Killzone was a very daring game in their art direction, and it stood out with its atmospheric, deferred rendering techniques and its dense feel and the weighted feel that Killzone brought to the table. And that was a game that was running at 720p, 30 frames per second, which is not that impressive. Even in that generation, it was like, we were looking at Call of Duty, and Call of Duty was playing a little bit over 720p at 60 frames per second. So there was a lot more going on with the rendering and the technology that was behind a game like Killzone 2. And that was considered a masterpiece. That game was incredible. Now imagine if the PS3 had a mid-console refresh. Maybe they could have done more with Killzone to make it run at a higher frame rate, and make it a little bit more like what we're accustomed to with the Call of Duty franchise, which always favored. I'm not sure which Call of Duty started it, but I know for sure that Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was the one that set the tone for the standard of a 60 FPS gaming experience on the console. And look what happened to it. It skyrocketed into stardom ever since COD 4, because that's what people wanted. They wanted that reactiveness that came with higher frames. Battlefield 2142, that's a game that came out in this current generation. An ambitious title, a lot more CPU demanding, but it maxes out at 60 FPS because of how many players are on the screen and the scale of the maps and things like that, right? Warzone 2 still goes up to 120 frames per second. So they're not worried about as much things like destruction and all that kind of stuff, or high player count, 128 players within the same area on the map. That wasn't really the issue with Warzone. So 120 frames per second was something that they were able to focus on, and so cutting back on some of the quality of the textures and things like that, and having a lot of options with that allowed them to really open up those frame rates. And so even on consoles now, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, those are the ones that can hit 120 frames per second. And so it always comes down to the developer's approach, whether they take risks or whether they go for what's tried and true, or for the sake of their innovation in our direction. Sometimes they have to do more than what is expected, and that pushes the console to its limit. So I bring that up because I just want you to know this is not nothing new. We're used to this already. We've been used to this process for multiple console generations. The scale of modern games is always setting the bar higher and higher and higher, to the point where older consoles just simply cannot run them at the vision that the developers truly want, because there's always new technology being implemented and things like that. So what kind of technology? Well, you know what? It all comes down to two main factors with these mid-generation consoles, and especially for the PS5 Pro, because it may well be the only one that has a mid-gen refresh. I don't think the Xbox is going to do it now at this point. Can their games maintain 60 hertz while still keeping good visuals that use that technology that these developers are using? PSSR is going to change this trend. It's going to kind of stop the buck right here, because finally consoles are going to have enough firepower to push for the higher frame rates while still keeping that clean image, using the AI upscaling and things that checkerboard rendering was not able to do during the PS4 Pro era. Okay, now the other question is, ray tracing going to bring upgrades to games like Cyberpunk 2077 on PlayStation, or maybe even Grand Theft Auto 6? We know for sure that there are games that actually can run 60 FPS with ray tracing, and a perfect example of that is Metro Exodus, which runs very well on both new hardware, the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. You understand? So we know that. We see juggernaut games like Cyberpunk, Grand Theft Auto. Those are the types of games that really showcase whether or not a console can push beyond the capabilities that are expected of it. Because it's crazy how it's gotten to that point with a lot of games now. I'm gonna give you another example. So, two examples actually. Helldivers 2, Starship Troopers Extermination. Two heavily CPU-oriented games, right? Lots of enemies on screen, lots of action going on, explosion. There's a lot going on, right? And to the point where it pushes the PlayStation 5 to its limit. We have yet to see Starship Troopers Extermination, but it is the same premise as Helldivers, you know what I'm saying? A lot of AI units moving around, enemies, things like that, hordes of enemies and carnage and all kinds of particles and things like that. So the consoles they're able to hit the target of 60 FPS for a game like Helldivers, but at the cost of drastic measures regarding the resolution and the graphic settings. And I know because I play Helldivers and I use a monitor to play it, because when I play it on the big screen TV, my 4K TV, it looks really blurry. Like, it's noticeably blurry compared to the non-performance mode, right? Well, the PS5 Pro is going to fix things like that. I want to see how it's implemented in a game like that. You understand? Now, what if the PS5 Pro's hardware addresses those concerns directly? RDNA 4, that's AMD's technology, um, combined with the PSSR, which is Sony's proprietary technology, that will combine to bring the best out of the second half of this console generation. And for those that have not purchased a current generation console, now is the absolute perfect time to jump in. For those who are hardcore Sony fans like myself, well, it's time to get back to games. I haven't had time to finish all my games. I've been busy with work and my duties as an officer in the ISUPK, so I have my priorities straightened out. So I don't have a lot of time to play, but when I do have a catalog of titles that the PS5 Pro will further enhance as I'm continuing my progress in my collection of games. I have a lot of unfinished business, basically, when it comes to the games that are in my collection. God of War Ragnarok, Elden Ring. I'm going to name a couple more. Armored Core 6, Metro Exodus, Fallout 4's next-gen version, Cyberpunk 2077. I still got a lot of side missions to complete on there. I did complete the Phantom Liberty DLC, and that was awesome. Um, so I've enjoyed all these games periodically, but I haven't completed all of them. So with the PS5 Pro, it's gonna really shift me from the monitor setup back to the 4K 60 big screen setup, and I'm perfectly okay with that because that's where the console is really at home, is on a setup like that. And I like playing on the monitor for games that go beyond 60 FPS. And so there's a time for that too. But for the sake of these single player games, getting the best out of its visuals while using that typical, couch gaming setup rather than the hardcore gaming setup with the gaming monitor and all that, the chair and all that. It don't always have to be like that, the try hard stuff. It ain't always got to be like that. And I think that's something that the PS5 Pro will give me the versatility with, wanting to get back into the single player experiences that um, Sony and these other multi-platform developers have been producing. Some great stuff, right? Now, again, my multiplayer games, Helldivers 2, got Warzone 2, of course, Black Ops 6 is around the corner. Predator Hunting Grounds is getting a PS5 release at the beginning of October. Starship Troopers Extermination, also at the beginning of October. I'm going to be playing both of those. Now, all of these greatly benefit from the PS5 Pro, according to what everybody is saying, right? And so you can expect these games that I'm mentioning to trend in that direction and to take advantage of that hardware. With the base PS5, Helldivers 2's performance mode looks terrible. We talked about that, right? And that's why I play it on the monitor. Predator Hunting Grounds, they're going to receive that PS5 launch early. Starship Trooper has been cooking PC since its beta launched a year ago, but they've been working on optimization for that game, and they've been adding more content. And the development team, they even teamed up with the guy that played as Rico on the original Starship Troopers movie. So they've done a lot of cool shit with that. So I see they've done a lot of excellent work to provide much more compatible experiences with the current gen consoles, and we're going to get proof of that next month, right? Even more so with the PS5 Pro, because it's launching on Xbox Series X and the PS5. So you can imagine that the Pro is going to take things up an even better notch for a game like that. Now, all these games that I mentioned, they're going to be enhanced drastically by this console. And if the rumors are true, the Pro will even strong arm a few of these 120 FPS titles to a much more consistent frames per second. I'm curious to see what it does with Black Ops. Because I believe since, what was it, Warzone 1? Black Ops Cold War? Call of Duty. Is it World War Two or whatever? Those games all went up to 120 frames per second, mostly consistently. But to have a more stable frame rate with enhanced visuals using that PSSR, I think that's something that I would definitely like to see on my gaming monitor because I play on a 1440p monitor, right, at the crib. So that'll be a nice middle ground. I don't have to go all the way up to 4K. I'll just let the PlayStation 4 Pro render at that 1440p and bring the most out of those 120 hertz games like that. So that's gonna be pretty cool to see. And actually, I can't really knock mobile gaming anymore, especially now that I've set up this particular deal that I have here in the on the bus. Now you're seeing some actual direct feed gameplay here of what I actually did was I maxed out the settings within the mobile game because I'm actually testing. I'm doing a min max test on my mobile phone to see how well it plays, and my cell phone goes up to 120 frames per second on its screen. So I've been messing with the settings within the Warzone mobile app, and it actually reminds me of the same exact argument that we're seeing right now with the consoles. You have to sacrifice quality if you want the higher frame rates, if you want to go beyond 60 frames per second. I could lower the settings all the way down, textures all the way down, field of view lower than 90, upscale setting in the options menu at low shadows, low. I can do that. And then the frame rates will go up drastically. I'll be hovering over 100 frames per second most of the match, even damn near to where it's locked at 120 if I go all the way down on the setting. But for the sake of this video, as you've been looking at this footage of the direct feed, I actually went the opposite direction just to see what my cell phone can really do, right? I went and maxed out the textures, I maxed out the shadows, I maxed out the upscaling, the resolution, all that. You saw that in the menu. Now you're seeing me actually taking it and putting it into gameplay. And what I've noticed is that everything matters that you do. If you're using a Bluetooth headset, you get more latency. You don't necessarily want that, but that's a cost of you having to use power from the the chip that's within the cell phone, right? Um, if I'm changing the settings, right? If I'm putting it at higher settings, that increases latency because it takes more process per frame, and so the time of each frame is raised up by milliseconds. And so that's something that I'm kind of seeing here is that I can still play pretty well, but I have much more reaction latency when the settings are lower. And so that's interesting that carries right on over to the mobile game. And this is a very, very demanding mobile game. This is Warzone mobile, right? This isn't Call of Duty mobile that was out a few years back that was running good on pretty much every phone that was out. This game is actually designed for future cell phones that haven't even launched yet. You understand? Like it's pushing the boundaries of what a cell phone can do. You can play it on an iPhone, you can play it on the Galaxy, that. I'm playing it on the Sony phone because it's kind of built for that. And I've been having so much fun with it. You seen the other day I had a game where I had like 80 kills in the game, and only like 4 or 5 deaths. It's just that kind of advantage that you build based off of your hardware setup and then your settings, right? Everything that is a component within the PS5 Pro is going to benefit the way that it looks, the way that it runs, how smooth it is, and even with all that being said, giving you an advantage at least over other console players that are on the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 base model, or maybe even cross gen platform games if you're playing against people on PlayStation 4. People play Fortnite against people that play on the Switch, and the other person's on a high powered gaming PC. Who do you think is going to win those firefights, right? So anything that's going to bring your ability to perform better in multiplayer, if you play games enough like that and you have the skill and want to have every advantage that you can, go for it. And I think $700 is definitely reasonable when you consider that people spend thousands of dollars to get those same advantages. They go up to 240 frames per second on a 4090 GPU with the brand new CPU and all the latest tech for their high rigs or high technology rigs for their PC builds. So what you're seeing in this footage here is just a small example of what happens when you either use a superior cell phone or just flat out use different settings to give yourself an advantage. And even so, it's not even about the settings. Part of the reason why I'm finding so much success playing even in this mobile game is because I'm using a monitor on the bus and a controller. You know what I'm saying? Rather than touching the screen on my phone and blocking the dude in the corner with my thumb because I'm trying to move. No, I don't. I'm not dealing with any of that. I'm just playing it like I would a console, except it's my phone, and I'm on the bus riding home from work. So that's been my rant, man. I hope y'all enjoyed the footage here. Just go ahead and let the rest of the video play out. But just want y'all to think about that while you're considering whether or not you want to buy the PlayStation 5 Pro, or if you want to hold off until the next generation. You might have to wait a couple years for that. But as of right now, people are playing games now. People want the advantage now. So if you feel like dropping the coin on it, I wouldn't blame you for doing it. You know what I'm saying? You spend enough money on going out to eat every goddamn day. You might as well put some money aside and get something like this because it's nice to have. Because 10 years from now, we don't even know if games are even going to have the option to have a disc drive. You can still get a disc drive for the PS5 Pro. If you play it on PC, you don't even own any of your games. You own none of your games because they're all digital. PlayStation is the master race. That's the end of my rant. Shalom.